What if the person you trust most is secretly planning your death? She thought her marriage was perfect until her husband made her a cup of tea that nearly killed her. But the most shocking truth came from the woman he was secretly seeing, and her confession exposed a deadly plan no one saw coming. In the quiet town of Brookdale, life moved slowly. People greeted each other by name, children rode bicycles along tree-lined streets, and neighbors shared friendly smiles every morning. It was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know everyone else's story. At the end of Maple Street stood a beautiful white two-story house with blue shutters and a carefully trimmed garden. Bright red roses lined the walkway, and a wooden swing hung from the porch. This house belonged to Daniel Harper and his wife, Melissa Harper. To the outside world, they were the definition of a perfect couple. Daniel Harper was known as a successful financial advisor. He wore clean suits, spoke calmly, and always appeared confident. Clients trusted him with their savings, and many admired his sharp mind. He had a way of making people feel safe, like everything was under control. Melissa Harper was just as respected. She worked as a teacher at Brookdale Elementary School, where children adored her. Parents often praised her patience and kindness. She believed education could change lives, and she treated every student like her own child. Together, Daniel and Melissa looked like the ideal team. Every year, they hosted elegant dinner parties at their home. Neighbors gathered around their large dining table, laughing and sharing stories late into the night. Melissa cooked delicious meals, while Daniel poured drinks and told jokes that made everyone laugh. On social media, their lives looked even more perfect. Photos showed them smiling on vacations, celebrating anniversaries, and holding hands during sunset walks. Their anniversary pictures were especially popular. Daniel always gave Melissa a bouquet of white lilies, her favorite flowers. People often said, "If there's a perfect marriage, it must be theirs." But behind those smiling photos, something had begun to change. Melissa noticed the difference slowly, like a shadow growing longer each day. At first, it was small things. Daniel began coming home later than usual. He claimed work had become more demanding. He said new clients required extra meetings. Melissa trusted him, so she didn't question it too much. But the late nights continued. Sometimes Daniel returned home after midnight. His voice sounded tired, but something about his behavior felt strange. He avoided eye contact and quickly changed the subject whenever Melissa asked about his day. "Just work stress," he would say with a forced smile. Melissa tried to believe him. After all, they had been married for 12 years. They had shared dreams, laughter, and difficult moments together. Trust had always been the strongest part of their relationship. Still, a quiet unease began to grow inside her. One evening, Daniel walked in the house carrying his briefcase. Melissa hugged him as usual, but something caught her attention. A faint scent she didn't recognize. It wasn't her perfume. It was sweet and floral, unfamiliar. She pulled away slightly, her heart beating faster. "New perfume at the office?" she asked casually. Daniel laughed quickly. "Probably from someone in the elevator," he replied. "You know how crowded it gets." His answer sounded simple, but something about his tone felt rushed. Melissa didn't argue. Instead, she nodded and forced a smile. But that night, she lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside her. Her thoughts refused to quiet. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's strange behavior continued. He started taking phone calls outside the house, speaking in low voices. Sometimes he stepped into the backyard or locked himself in his office before answering. Once, Melissa walked past his office door and heard him whispering. When she entered the room, he quickly ended the call. "Wrong number," he said. Melissa tried to ignore the growing doubt inside her heart. She reminded herself of their happy years, their shared memories, and their promises. But deep inside, fear was beginning to take root. Then came the moment that changed everything. One quiet Saturday afternoon, Melissa decided to clean Daniel's home office while he was out running errands. Papers were scattered across the desk, and she carefully organized them into neat stacks. As she lifted a thick folder, something slipped out and fell onto the floor. It was a receipt. At first, she thought it was just another business expense. But when she picked it up and read the details, her breath caught in her throat. It was from a hotel in the next city. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the date. Her mind raced. That date matched a night when Daniel had told her he was on a business trip. She read further. Room 214. 2 guests. Melissa felt her chest tighten as if the air had suddenly disappeared. 2 guests. Not 1. Her fingers shook as she held the paper, staring at the words again and again, hoping she had misunderstood. But the truth stared back at her, cold and clear. That night, Melissa didn't confront Daniel. Instead, she folded the receipt carefully and placed it back where she found it. She acted normal when Daniel returned home, smiling and asking about his day. But inside, her world had begun to crack. Later, as she lay in bed beside him, she listened to the sound of his breathing. Slow, calm, peaceful, as if nothing was wrong. Melissa stared into the darkness, her heart pounding loudly in her chest. Questions filled her mind. Who was the second guest? Why had Daniel lied? Was her perfect marriage just an illusion? She didn't know it yet. But that single piece of paper was the beginning of a terrifying journey. One that would soon turn her perfect life into a deadly trap. After finding the hotel receipt, Melissa's life changed in quiet but painful ways. She still smiled at neighbors, still went to work, and still cooked dinner every evening. But inside, her heart felt heavy with doubt. Every small action Daniel made now felt suspicious. She began watching him more carefully. At night, when Daniel fell asleep, Melissa stayed awake. She listened to his breathing and stared at the faint glow of his phone lying on the bedside table. Her mind kept returning to the hotel receipt hidden in his office. She wanted answers. But she was also afraid of what those answers might be. One night, after hours of hesitation, Melissa reached slowly toward Daniel's phone. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. For years, she had trusted him completely. She had never felt the need to check his private messages. Now, everything felt different. She unlocked the phone, using the passcode she already knew, his birthday. For a moment, she considered putting it back, but the memory of the receipt pushed her forward. She opened his messages. At first, nothing looked unusual. Work reminders, messages from clients, and short replies to friends. But as she scrolled further, one name caught her attention. Lena Moore. Melissa paused, staring at the name. She opened the conversation. The earliest messages looked harmless. They discussed office tasks and meeting schedules. Lena seemed polite and respectful. Melissa almost felt relieved. Maybe she had misunderstood everything. But then she kept scrolling. The tone of the messages changed. I miss you today. Wish you were here. Last night meant everything. Melissa felt her chest tighten painfully. Her hands shook as she read more messages. Late night conversations, private jokes, and plans to meet outside work hours. There was no doubt anymore. Daniel was having an affair. Tears filled Melissa's eyes, but she forced herself to stay quiet. She placed the phone back exactly where she had found it and lay down beside Daniel. He slept peacefully, unaware that his secret had just been exposed. Melissa didn't cry out loud. Instead, silent tears rolled down her cheeks into the pillow. The next morning, Daniel behaved like nothing had happened. He kissed her goodbye before leaving for work, smiling the same familiar smile. Melissa watched him walk out the door. Her heart felt broken, but her mind was clear. She needed to know the truth. Instead of confronting Daniel immediately, Melissa made a bold decision. She wanted to see the other woman face to face. That afternoon, she searched Lena Moore's name online. It didn't take long to find her. Lena worked at the same financial firm as Daniel. Her profile photo showed a young woman with bright eyes and confident posture. She looked stylish, modern, and full of energy. Melissa felt a strange mix of anger and curiosity. She wanted to know who this woman was, the person who had stepped into her marriage. 2 days later, Melissa prepared herself. She dressed neatly but simply, choosing neutral colors that made her feel calm. Her hands trembled slightly as she drove to Daniel's office building. Her heart pounded harder with every mile. When she arrived, she sat quietly in the lobby, pretending to read a magazine while secretly watching the employees walk in and out. Minutes felt like hours. Then suddenly, she saw her, Lena Moore. Melissa recognized her immediately from the photo. Lena looked even younger in person, mid-20s, fashionable, and confident. She carried herself with ease, laughing with another coworker as she walked toward the reception desk. Melissa stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself forward. "Excuse me," she said. Lena turned around. "Yes," she replied politely. Melissa took a deep breath. "Are you Lena Moore?" Lena nodded. "I'm Daniel Harper's wife." For a brief moment, the world seemed to freeze. The smile disappeared from Lena's face. Her eyes widened with shock, and the color drained from her cheeks. Melissa expected denial. She expected anger. Maybe even an argument. But Lena did something unexpected. She looked terrified. "We need to talk," Lena whispered quickly. "But not here." Melissa frowned, confused. "Why not here?" she asked. Lena glanced nervously around the office lobby, as if afraid someone might be watching. "Please," she said softly. "Meet me somewhere else." Her voice shook slightly. Melissa studied her face carefully. There was fear in her eyes. Not guilt alone, but something deeper. Something that made Melissa uneasy. That evening, they agreed to meet at a small cafe located at the edge of town. It was quiet and far from the busy streets. Melissa arrived first. She sat near the window, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of untouched coffee. Her thoughts raced through endless possibilities. What would Lena say? Would she apologize? Would she lie? Or would she reveal something worse? Minutes later, Lena entered the cafe. She walked slowly, her shoulders tense, her eyes scanning the room before spotting Melissa. Without saying a word, she sat down across from her. For several seconds, silence filled the air. Finally, Lena spoke. "I didn't know he was still with you at first," she said quietly. Melissa felt anger rising in her chest. "What do you mean?" she asked sharply. Lena lowered her eyes. "He told me you were planning to leave him." Melissa blinked in disbelief. "That's not true," she replied firmly. Lena swallowed nervously. "I thought something wasn't right," she admitted. "But there's more, something you need to know." Melissa leaned forward slightly. Her heart pounded loudly in her ears. "What more?" she whispered. Lena hesitated. Her hands trembled as she reached into her bag. What she pulled out next would change everything Melissa thought she knew about her marriage. And it would reveal a secret far more dangerous than an affair. The cafe felt unusually quiet as Lena slowly placed a folded document on the table between them. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the street. Inside, the soft hum of a coffee machine filled the silence. Melissa stared at the paper but didn't touch it immediately. Her heart pounded loudly in her chest. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Lena swallowed hard. "Just read it." Melissa reached forward, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the document. Her eyes moved slowly across the page, trying to make sense of the words. At first, nothing registered. Then suddenly, one phrase caught her attention. "Life insurance policy." Her breath caught in her throat. She kept reading. The insured person Melissa Harper. The beneficiary Daniel Harper. The payout amount made her feel dizzy. $2 million. Melissa looked up sharply, her face pale. "What is this?" she whispered again, this time with fear. Lena leaned closer, lowering her voice. "He asked me to help prepare this," Lena said nervously. "He told me you were very sick." Melissa stared at her in shock. "Sick?" she repeated. "I'm not sick." "I know," Lena said quickly. That's when I started to feel something was wrong. Melissa felt cold fear creeping into her chest. When did he do this? She asked. A few months ago. Lena replied. He told me it was urgent. He said you had a serious illness and that he wanted to make sure you were financially protected. Melissa shook her head slowly. That's a lie, she whispered. All of it? Lena nodded. I figured that out later, she admitted, but by then, I had already helped him with something worse. Melissa felt her stomach twist painfully. Worse than this? She asked. Lena hesitated before reaching into her handbag again. This time, she pulled out a small glass vial. Inside was a clear liquid. Melissa stared at it, confused. What is that? She asked. Lena placed it carefully on the table. He told me it was medicine, she said softly. He asked me to deliver it to your house last week. Melissa's mind raced as memories suddenly rushed back. Last week. Tuesday night. Daniel had prepared tea for her after dinner. He rarely made tea, but that night, he had insisted. You look tired, he had said gently. Drink this. It'll help you relax. Melissa remembered the strange taste. Bitter, unpleasant. She had felt dizzy soon after drinking it. Her head had spun, and she had blamed it on exhaustion. Daniel had acted concerned, helping her lie down and telling her to rest. At the time, she had trusted him completely. Now, the memory made her feel sick. Are you saying, Melissa began, her voice shaking, that this was poison? Lena looked down at her hands. I don't know for sure, she whispered. But something felt wrong. After he gave it to me, I became scared. I searched online about the label he mentioned, and it didn't match any medicine I could find. Melissa's hands began to tremble. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She demanded. Lena's eyes filled with tears. Because he warned me, she admitted. He said if I ever spoke to you, it would destroy everything, for him and for me. Melissa felt anger rising again, but underneath it was something stronger. Fear. Deep, cold fear. What exactly did he tell you about me? Melissa asked. Lena hesitated. He said you were planning to leave him, she replied. He told me you were taking his money and ruining his life. He made it sound like he was the victim. Melissa shook her head firmly. That's not true, she said. I never planned to leave him. Lena nodded slowly. I know that now, she whispered, but back then, I believed him. Silence filled the space between them. Outside, darkness had begun to settle over the street. Melissa leaned back in her chair, trying to control her breathing. Her mind raced as pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. Fake illness, life insurance, strange medicine, lies. It all pointed to something terrible, something deadly. Suddenly, Melissa remembered another moment. One she had ignored at the time. 2 weeks earlier, Daniel had asked about her daily routine. What time do you usually come home? He had asked casually. What do you eat for lunch? What medicine do you take? She had answered without thinking, believing it was harmless conversation. Now, those questions felt sinister. Has he ever talked about my health to you again? Melissa asked quickly. Lena nodded. Yes, she said softly. He said you were getting weaker. Melissa's heart raced faster. He even asked me to help create fake medical records. Lena added quietly. Melissa froze. Fake medical records. The words echoed loudly in her mind. That was no longer suspicion. That was planning. Careful, dangerous planning. Why are you telling me all this now? Melissa asked, her voice tight with tension. Lena looked up at her, tears sliding down her cheeks. Because I realized he wasn't just lying, she whispered. He was planning something terrible. Melissa stared at the vial again. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the glass surface. For the first time in her life, she felt true fear of the man she had loved for 12 years. Her husband wasn't just cheating. He might be trying to kill her. A cold shiver ran down her spine. In that moment, Melissa understood something terrifying. This was no longer about betrayal. This was about survival. And if she didn't act quickly, Her perfect marriage could soon become her death sentence. Melissa barely remembered how she drove home after leaving the cafe. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, and her mind replayed Lena's words over and over again. Life insurance, fake illness, poison. Each thought felt heavier than the last. The man she had trusted for 12 years, the man she shared a home with, might be planning her death. When she reached home, Daniel was already there. He sat comfortably on the living room couch, watching television as if nothing was wrong. The warm yellow light from the lamp made the room feel calm and peaceful. Too peaceful. Melissa forced herself to walk inside normally. "Hey," Daniel said, smiling casually. "You're late today." Melissa placed her purse on the table and forced a small smile. "Just stayed after work," she replied. Her voice sounded steady, but inside her heart pounded wildly. She studied his face carefully. His expression looked normal, relaxed, even caring. But now, every small detail about him felt suspicious. That night, Melissa barely slept. She lay awake beside Daniel, listening to his steady breathing. Her thoughts raced endlessly. Should she confront him? Should she leave immediately? Or should she go to the police? By morning, she made her decision. She needed proof. Without proof, her story would sound unbelievable. No one would accept that a respected man like Daniel Harper could be planning such a crime. Later that afternoon, Melissa contacted Detective Aaron Blake. Blake was known in Brookdale for handling difficult cases. He had a calm voice and sharp eyes that noticed details others missed. Melissa met him at the police station, her hands trembling slightly as she sat across from him. She placed the insurance papers on the desk. Then, slowly, she showed him the vial Lena had given her. Blake studied the items carefully, his expression turning serious. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Melissa explained everything. Daniel's strange behavior, the hotel receipt, Lena's confession, and the suspicious tea. Blake listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "If this is true," he said slowly, "then your husband isn't just cheating, he's planning murder." Melissa felt a chill run down her spine, hearing the words spoken aloud. "What should I do?" she asked. Blake leaned forward slightly. "We need evidence," he said firmly. "Real, undeniable evidence." Together, they created a dangerous plan. Melissa would act as if nothing had changed. She would continue living normally, pretending she suspected nothing. Meanwhile, the police would secretly monitor Daniel's actions. Hidden cameras would be installed in the kitchen and living room. Laboratory tests would be ready to examine any suspicious drinks or food. It was risky, but it was the only way to catch him. The next few days felt like living inside a nightmare. Melissa smiled when Daniel spoke to her. She laughed at his jokes. She cooked dinner and shared meals at the same table. But inside, fear grew stronger every hour. Daniel, meanwhile, behaved unusually kind. He brought home flowers one evening, white lilies, her favorite. Melissa stared at them, her chest tightening. He hadn't bought her flowers in months. "Thought you'd like these," he said gently. She forced herself to smile. "They're beautiful," she replied. But his sudden kindness didn't feel loving. It felt planned. That same night, Melissa noticed something disturbing. Daniel watched her closely during dinner. Every time she lifted her glass or touched her plate, his eyes followed her movements carefully, as if he were waiting, watching, measuring. 2 days later, the moment they feared finally arrived. Daniel entered the kitchen carrying 2 cups. Steam rose from the surface of the tea. "I made something special," he said with a warm smile. Melissa's pulse raced instantly. "Chamomile tea," he added. "Good for stress." She forced herself to remain calm. Inside the house, hidden cameras recorded everything. Melissa accepted the cup slowly. Her hands trembled slightly, but she tried to hide it. Daniel stood nearby, watching her. "Drink it while it's hot," he said. His voice sounded gentle, but there was tension behind his words. Melissa lifted the cup to her lips. For a split second, Fear almost overwhelmed her, but she remembered the plan. Pretending to sip, she lowered the cup and placed it on the table. Moments later, when Daniel stepped out of the room to answer a phone call, Melissa moved quickly. She poured the tea into a nearby plant. Her hands shook violently. When Daniel returned, she forced a weak smile. "That helped," she said. Daniel studied her carefully, as if searching for signs of illness. Later that night, police collected the leftover liquid from the plant's soil. Melissa waited anxiously for results. The next morning, Detective Blake called. His voice sounded grim. "The test confirmed it," he said. Melissa held her breath. There was poison in that tea. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her. The truth was now undeniable. Daniel Harper had tried to kill her. Police began preparing for his arrest. Everything was ready. But just before they could act, something unexpected happened. Melissa's phone rang late that evening. The caller ID showed Lena's name. Melissa answered quickly. "Hello." On the other side, Lena sounded terrified. Her breathing was fast and uneven. "He found out," Lena whispered. Melissa's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" she asked urgently. "He knows everything," Lena said, her voice shaking. "He came to my apartment. He was furious." A loud crashing sound echoed through the phone. Melissa froze in fear. "Lena," she shouted, "are you okay?" But there was no response. Only silence. Then the call suddenly ended. Melissa lowered the phone slowly, her hands trembling. Fear tightened around her chest. Daniel wasn't just dangerous. He was desperate now. And desperate people were capable of anything. Melissa stared at her phone, frozen in place after Lena's call ended. The silence in the room felt heavy and terrifying. Her hands trembled as she looked toward Detective Blake, who had been standing nearby when the call came through. "He found her," Melissa whispered, her voice barely steady. Detective Blake reacted instantly. "Stay here," he said firmly as he reached for his radio. "We're moving now." Within minutes, police cars sped through the quiet streets of Brookdale, their sirens breaking the calm night air. Melissa sat inside one of the vehicles, her heart pounding so loudly it felt impossible to think. Every second felt like an hour. She kept replaying Lena's frightened voice in her mind. "He knows everything." When they reached Lena's apartment building, officers rushed toward the entrance. The hallway lights flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the walls. Detective Blake moved carefully toward Lena's door. It was slightly open. That alone made Melissa's stomach twist with fear. Officers pushed the door open slowly. "Police!" one of them shouted. Inside, the apartment looked messy. A chair had been knocked over, and broken glass pieces lay scattered across the floor. Signs of struggle were everywhere. Melissa held her breath. Then she saw Lena. She was sitting on the floor near the wall, shaking violently. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but she was alive. Relief rushed through Melissa like a wave. "Lena," she cried, stepping forward. An officer gently helped Lena to her feet. "He was here," Lena whispered weakly. "He knows I told you." He was so angry. "Where is he now?" Detective Blake asked quickly. Lena swallowed hard. "He left. He packed a bag and said he was leaving town." That was all police needed to hear. An alert was sent across nearby highways, and officers began searching for Daniel immediately. Hours passed with no sign of him. Melissa sat quietly at the police station, wrapped in a blanket, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Her life felt like it had turned into a nightmare she couldn't escape. Then, just before sunrise, the call came. They had found him. Daniel Harper had been spotted driving along a quiet highway leading out of Brookdale. His car was packed with cash, documents, and personal belongings. He was trying to disappear. Police surrounded his vehicle and ordered him to step out. To everyone's surprise, Daniel didn't fight. He simply raised his hands and surrendered. Back at the station, Daniel sat calmly in the interrogation room, his face expressionless. The same man who once smiled warmly at neighbors now looked cold and distant. At first, he denied everything. "This is a misunderstanding," he insisted. "I would never hurt my wife." But the evidence against him was overwhelming. The poisoned tea, the fake insurance documents, the recorded footage from inside the house. Every lie he told fell apart quickly. Still, he refused to confess. That's when Lena made a decision that shocked everyone. Despite her fear, she agreed to testify. Inside the interrogation room, Lena faced Daniel for the first time since his attack. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice grew stronger with every word. "You told me she was sick," Lena said, tears forming in her eyes. "You told me you were protecting her." Daniel glared at her, but remained silent. "You lied to me," Lena continued. "You made me help you create fake medical records. You told me it was harmless." Melissa listened from outside the room, her heart pounding heavily. But Lena wasn't finished. "When you gave me that liquid," she said, pointing toward the evidence bag, "you told me it was medicine. But when I questioned you, you threatened me." Daniel's expression darkened. He said, "If I told anyone." Lena cried, her voice breaking, "It would hurt Ma, or Melissa." The room fell silent. Detective Blake leaned forward. "Why did you plan this, Daniel?" he asked. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Then finally, his calm mask cracked. His voice came out cold and bitter. "I was going to lose everything," he muttered. "Money, reputation, my entire life." Melissa felt chills hearing his words. "You were never sick," Daniel continued. "But if you had died, I would have received the insurance money." His confession shocked everyone in the room. The truth was now undeniable. Daniel Harper, the man everyone admired, had planned to murder his own wife for money. In the following weeks, the case went to court. Evidence was presented piece by piece. The poisoned liquid, the forged documents, the recorded footage, and Lena's powerful testimony. The courtroom remained silent as the judge delivered the final verdict. Daniel Harper was sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Melissa sat quietly in the courtroom, her hands resting in her lap. She felt relief, but also deep sadness. The man she once loved had nearly destroyed her life. Months later, Melissa left Brookdale. She sold the white house on Maple Street, the house once filled with happy memories that now felt haunted by betrayal. She moved to a new city, determined to start fresh. Life was not easy at first. Trust did not come quickly anymore, but slowly, day by day, Melissa rebuilt her strength. As for Lena, she struggled with guilt for a long time. Though she had helped Daniel unknowingly, her courage to speak the truth had saved Melissa's life. In the end, the town of Brookdale learned a chilling lesson. Appearances can be deceiving. A perfect marriage can hide dangerous secrets. And sometimes, the person who smiles beside you every day may be the one quietly setting a deadly trap.